Hello there, and welcome to the digestion unit. This time around with this unit, I'm going to be this little presence in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, so you can see me as I'm talking, because I think my own experience anyway is that I like to be able to see the person who's talking. So just like any other time that we start a new unit, the first thing that we need to do is go through a few definitions. And first of all, meaning the definition of what is digestion. So just like we talked about the muscular system, its job is to move, muscles move. The skeletal system, it provides support for the body, it places a place for muscles to attach, it creates blood cells, and it gives some form and structure to the body. That is for the skeletal system. For the nervous system, takes in stimulus, transforms it or transmits it to the brain. The brain decides whether or not to do anything about it, and if the brain decides not to ignore it and to actually act on it, then it sends a message back out to the body. And the cardiovascular system is a two-part function where the cardiovascular system carries oxygen and nutrients to the cells of the body, and then it carries carbon dioxide and waste away from the cells. So here we are at the digestive system, and we would work through this if we were in class, and I would eventually get you to the point where you get the basic idea of we start with food, because we all know that digestion includes, eating. I just finished dinner and it was lovely. But that's not the end goal of it. It's not just putting food into our mouths and into our stomachs. Something happens to the food. So the food gets broken down into other substances, smaller substances, and eventually the ultimate goal of the digestive system is to create substances that can then be converted into ATP. Now, as you go along, you should have printed off the student version of this PowerPoint, and you should have some fill in the blanks to do. Of course, I'm not there to make sure that you actually did it, but I'm trusting that you did that, so don't let me down. And the next thing that we would do if we were in class would be we'd talk about, okay, what does that mean that glucose is converted into ATP? And somebody would come up with the correct answer that changing glucose into ATP is the job of the mitochondria, and at that point someone would shout out, "Oh, the powerhouse of the cell." And I would say, "Yes, that's right." And the process where the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, converts glucose into ATP is called cellular respiration. So the digestive system and the digestive process, its goal really is to take the food that we eat and change it into something that can go to the cells. These are the nutrients that we talk about when we talk about oxygen and nutrients being carried by the cardiovascular system. And once these nutrients get to the cells, the mitochondria then breaks it down into ATP in the process of cellular respiration. And guess what? In order for this to happen, you also have to have oxygen. So, as we've talked about all year, everything connects. So let's talk about a couple other terms. The digestive system is broken down into two sets of organs. One is the alimentary canal, and the alimentary canal contains the organs that you generally think of as part of the digestive system. So if I were to ask you, name a part of the digestive system, somebody would say stomach, somebody would say intestines, someone would say esophagus. And when you think about it, those organs are all connected to each other, and the difference is just that they have a different shape in different places. The esophagus that runs from the back of your mouth to your stomach is just like a garden hose. And the stomach is a pouch shape. It's often described as a J-shaped pouch. But it's all one long tube. Starts at the mouth, ends at the anus. And so you know that. That's something that is already in your memory banks. So that's the alimentary canal. That's the part that food actually goes through. You then have something called accessory organs. Now, when you talk about accessorizing, and um, guys, we know that you do it too, but for a lady, accessorizing might be choosing jewelry or a purse or shoes that go with their outfit. For guys, it's more like, the belt and the gold chain you got to wear around your neck. But you're accessorizing is something that goes with. It helps complete the outfit. While accessory organs help complete digestion. They go along with the other organs. And these accessory organs produce substances that help with digestion. Most of the time, they are enzymes. There are a couple exclusions or exceptions to that, but for the most part, they are enzymes. And the accessory organs never actually touch the food. So some examples, like the liver is one of your accessory organs of your digestive system, but food never actually goes in the liver. So the liver produces a substance that then travels to the food and then helps to break down the food. That's an accessory organ. So food never actually goes into the accessory organs. All right, are we good so far? Remember, I need you to, if you need time to write things down, you need to be stopping the video and taking the time to do that, because you need to have this information. All right, a couple more terms that will come up as we go through. There are actually two different types of digestion. There is something called mechanical digestion, and this is something that you guys are already familiar with. When you took chemistry, you talked about different types of changes that can happen to matter. Now, you didn't talk about mechanical change, but you did talk about physical changes. And probably one of the examples that you saw in your chemistry class of physical change is taking a piece of paper and tearing it in half. That's a physical change. Well, when you take a sheet of paper and you tear it in half, the two halves that you have left, they're still paper. So in a physical change in chemistry or a mechanical change here in anatomy, this is a change that happens where you have bigger pieces of food, because we're talking about digestion. Bigger pieces of food are broken down into smaller pieces of food, but it's still the same food. So, for example, I told you I just finished with my dinner. We had pork tenderloin and roasted potatoes and asparagus for dinner, and oh, was it good. Well, as I was chewing the asparagus, I was breaking the asparagus down into smaller pieces, a big piece of asparagus broken down into smaller pieces of asparagus, but it was still asparagus. As you chew a piece of bread, you start with a big piece of bread, and it becomes a smaller piece of bread. So that's mechanical digestion. Chewing is the number one form of mechanical digestion, but if you want to, and this is kind of fun, one of the neat things about the digestive system is that we end up with all different types of fun facts for you to take home. If you really want to freak your parents out, since mechanical digestion is taking bigger pieces of food and breaking them into smaller pieces of food, remember when you were little and your parents cut up your meat for you? Technically, that's mechanical digestion. So I dare you, I triple dog dare you, next time you're sitting at dinner with everybody, ask your parents to start digesting your food for you. You know what they're going to think? They're going to think mama bird regurgitating food for baby bird. But no, you just mean you want them to cut their meat for you. That's it. But hey, just a suggestion. Chemical digestion then, just like chemical changes you learned about in chemistry class, there is actually a change to what the substance is. In chemistry, you talked about the 5 different signs that a chemical change is occurring. And I'm probably going to embarrass myself right now and only be able to think of 4. So light's given off, heat's given off, there's a color change, a gas is produced, that would be effervescence, and, oh, a substrate. or not a substrate, a precipitate is formed. If you're not part of the problem or part of the solution, you're part of the precipitate. So if you take two liquids, pour them together, and it forms a solid, that's a precipitate. That's a chemical change in chemistry. Those are some signs of that. In a chemical change here in anatomy, it changes what the food is made of. So it's no longer just taking bigger pieces of food and breaking them down into smaller pieces. It's actually changing the essence of what the food is. Proteins. The pork tenderloin that I ate tonight, it is starting to be broken down into individual amino acids in my stomach. You have starches and sugars that are longer molecules broken down into simple carbohydrates. That's chemical change. And we will go through at each stage in the process and talk about where mechanical change takes place and where chemical change takes place. Before we get into the actual process, I wanted to talk about the different categories of nutrients, because this is one of those things that we think we know, but do we really? So, three main categories of nutrients. First one, the one that we all love to love, is carbohydrates. And remember, in digestion, you're taking big molecules, breaking them down into small molecules. So these carbohydrates that we're talking about start out as big molecules. And how they start out is in long strings of glucose molecules, thousands of glucose molecules put together. Sugars, like the sugar that you sprinkle on your cereal in the morning, or if you're like my father-in-law used to, he would put it on his spaghetti. Starches, like in bread and potatoes. And so bread and potatoes are two types of carbohydrates, but you also have to remember pasta, rice, fruits and veggies. Those have the good carbohydrates, and grains such as wheat, oats, and barley. So all of those are different types of carbohydrates. Another type of nutrient category is proteins, and there's probably my favorite protein in the whole wide world. Life is bacon. Bacon is life. Apologies to those of you who are vegetarian or vegan. I'm sorry, I can't help it. I love bacon. So proteins then are long strings of amino acids. So the digestive system, like I mentioned before, its job is to take these proteins, these strings of amino acids, and break them down into the individual amino acids. So not only is meat a part of this, and fish is a type of meat. Sorry if that breaks a bubble for you. Eggs, nuts have some protein, dairy has some protein, and beans have some protein. Nuts, dairy, and beans also have a fairly decent carbohydrate content. And nuts and dairy and eggs and meat, also, it's never simple, right? It's always got to be more complicated. These other things also contain bits of the third type of nutrient category, which is the fats. So fats are a little bit more complex as far as a molecule. They're the basic fats, fatty acids, are three long strands of carbon and hydrogen that are all linked together. And so this is why it's harder to break down the fats, because it's more involved. But you will find fats in oils, butters, fat, and when you look at that piece of bacon up there, you can see, you guys know where the fat is on that bacon. Avocados, good source of good fat, and then, like I said, the nuts. With all of these nutrient categories, the one thing I would really strongly encourage you to do is stay as close to the natural form as you can. Eating a hard-boiled egg is a lot better than eating an egg that's been mixed into a cake. Yes, it's an egg. Yes, it has the protein, but you get my picture. So staying away from processed foods, staying as close to its natural form is good for you. Eat an apple instead of applesauce. Things like that. You can do this. All right, I'm almost out of time. There's the end of part 1. See you later for part 2.